Hello fellow dude bros, my hair is finally, my head is shaved and I'm happy I can breathe again. It's still hot, but at least it's better now. I can actually produce I can inhale oxygen. That's happy times. Hello. Today I want to do something that I've been wanting to do for about a month now. I got really busy with uni and I felt like I want to clear myself of most stress before I, sit down and talk about this. Today I wanted to reflect on the reboot. So it's been a bit over a year now since the reboot happened. Well over a year since it happened in Japan, and it's slightly over a year since it happened in English. And in that year, a lot of stuff has happened to Vanguard and to the community and to a lot of different, aspects of the game and the, environment, community. And so I'm going to go over several positives, several negatives, kind of talk to you guys about my thoughts. I really want to hear yours as well, how you feel about the whole process of the reboot, like how do you feel about the fact that it happened. But first I'll talk about my stuff, then, I'll hear from you guys in the comments, but this is just going to be, chill out, grab a drink, whatever. It's going to be just a calm little discussion, nothing too serious, but, serious enough, I think, but, it's something worth talking about. So, reboot 1 year later. I'll go over the positives first, I think, let's go over the positives first. Let's start on a high note. Even the low notes aren't super low, I'd say. There's only one that I think is really low, but apart from that, I think it's mostly okay. So, first positive for me is that many players came back. So the whole thing with the reboot is that it happened, and a lot of the people that played back in like the Legion era or in the Limit Break era or before that, they picked up the game again because, their familiar units were coming back, the mechanics were becoming more simple to match with what they were expecting or what they were experiencing back in the day. And so that kind of, their expectations were met in a sense with what they wanted, I think. And so for a lot of players, I think it became easier to get into the game. And that's my second point, is that the game became easier to get people into it. That's another really good thing. It's like, not only did people get interested because they saw it rebooting and they saw that it's like, oh, my nostalgic units will be coming back, it was easy for us, the experienced players, to be spreading Vanguard again as well. And while it's always been possible throughout G, I feel like in the reboot it was a little bit easier because there was just less to explain, or there weren't as many layers to it, which I think, like, it's not a daunting part of Premium or anything in that sense. I think it's just like, it's nice that we have a step now. It's like we can teach someone Standard, and then if they want to, we can teach them Premium immediately, after they've gotten the grasp of the basics. So I think that's a nice thing to have. It's like a nice way to facilitate entry into the game and into the community, and that's definitely a huge plus that needs to be acknowledged as well. Another thing is that it's not only easy to get into Standard, or like, post-reboot, Vanguard, I guess, but the other thing is that it's easy to pick up decks. Like, that's the one thing I need to really make a point on, because in G, you would have to research a deck for a little bit, you'd have to learn about the combos here and there, you have to kind of like look up how it works, what it does, what are the optimal plays, it's like if you want to be learning something, like if I wanted to learn, I don't know, let's say when I picked up Vanquisher for the first time, I had to also think about, okay, when do I want to go for which stride, what do I want to do, what, it still sounds pretty simple in that case, but I think because there was like just less to understand in Standard, it made it easier for people to pick up whatever deck they want. Like, they can be playing with their Shadow Paladin deck for a whole day and then borrow their friend's Neo Nectar deck, and then, like, apart from having to read what tokens are, it's, that's basically what they had to understand, but that's something that somebody else can explain. So I think, at least for the first year, so really talking about the first year, I guess, it's been kind of like that. So that's what I think is nice, is that it's easier for people to try out new things. And so, it didn't really limit people back in the day, but I just want to add to the fact that it's easier to get into. I think it's a positive point and needs to be said. And now, this, I need to, like, shape it positively, but the thing is that the attendance for events at first slipped a little bit, but after 1 year, basically, after every clan got a round of support, the attendance of the events did actually go up. Now, I don't want to say, that this is like causation or something, it's almost like you could say a coincidence, but the fact that, every clan getting support, it might have been the reason why event attendance went up. It might not be. It might be just that people started to pick up the game again, or more people saw it during the holiday period or whatever, so it doesn't have to be really the reason why, but it might be part of it. That's the thing that I'm trying to say here. And so it's nice that the event attendance went up. It's good that it's coming back to its early days. Like we saw 2 weeks ago in England, in Cardiff, we saw that the UK Springfest had over 400 people for day one. That is huge. That's the second biggest event in Europe ever. The biggest one being in, I believe, in Manchester, like a few years back at the start of G with 500 players, you know? That is one of the biggest events ever in Europe, and so that being a thing is a really good thing to see, and that's definitely, you know, associated with the reboot too. You know, we don't know the real reasons or causes why so many people went, but it's still a really good thing. And for Premium too, like, there was like 150 players for France, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for Springfest, and then over 200 for the Springfest in England, I mean in the UK, and so that was also a really, really good thing. And so event attendance going up and hopefully continuing in that pattern for the BCS circuit is definitely something to be celebrated. I think two more positives, these will be more addressed to the other part of this community, in that the casual community grew a lot. So usually in Vanguard, the way I imagine things and the way I feel things have been throughout G is that most players were competitive. Like, people wanted to compete, go to locals, go to tournaments, travel for big tournaments, you know, just compete just because that's how we are. That's kind of how the game shapes us up to be. There's not that many collectors in this game, and so that's kind of like, you know, why that's a thing. But with Standard, the game became kind of this game that's good to play with your friends, just like chilling at home, not necessarily going to locals. And so a lot of people do just like pick up a trial deck or something and then play with their friends, you know, sometimes here and there, not necessarily like upgrading the decks or like building something competitive or like something that's like, you know, viable, something that has to be like built, you know, cookie cutter builds and stuff like that. And more of just this kind of like, well, you know, just to have a kind of game to play with my friends kind of thing. And I think with G, that mindset wasn't as present, or at least not for me to notice, but I've noticed it a lot more now in the reboot. There's a lot of people that just come up to locals and just pick up a deck and then never return, you know, with a friend. And so that definitely does happen. And I think the last thing connected to this kind of more like more of the casual side is that it became more valuable for collectors. They've introduced a lot of different rarities to an extent that sometimes they feel unnecessary, but for collectors that just want to collect rare, you know, shiny, cool looking cards, there's so much stuff. Like, we had SP packs in G, which I think is still the best part of the like high rarity chase. I think SP packs were the peak of it. I don't think like delete rares and etc. are the peak of it, but like I said, like delete rares, SVRs, like now the XVRs, SPs, etc. All these things, they really add to the collector value of a lot of these decks, and the people that want to collect and, you know, collect these expensive cards, they really do get the bang for, well, not really the bang for their buck, that's a weird thing to say, but there's just a lot more collectability in Vanguard right now, and I think that's what the reboot did aim for to an extent. I don't know if they aimed for it, but that's what it caused at least, so that's interesting. We'll see how it continues into the future, you know, since as the reboot goes on, but it's definitely an interesting point. Alright, so that's the main positives. Obviously there's a lot more, but I don't want to stretch out this video too much, so I kind of kept both of them to like 4 or 5 positives and negatives. So we're going to go over the negatives. I'm going to go into the by far the worst one. The thing that annoys me the most, like the thing that I feel is like inexcusable, is the divide in the community. Like, this could be addressed in a whole different video. I think this could be talked about in a completely separate video, but the divide in the community between the people that vouch for Standard and vouch for Premium is disgusting. Honestly, it's so annoying. It's just, it sometimes calms down, sometimes goes up again, and it's always just bouncing back and forth. Now with Premium Collection, it's gotten a bit better, but sometimes worse, because people just want to complain about things without really testing them or experiencing them. I feel like a lot of the Premium naysayers haven't even played much Premium or G, and, you know, that's part of it. And it's the same with the Standard naysayers. They might just, like, you know, have had a couple unlucky games in Standard and say, oh, Standard is luck-based. You know, both formats have their merits. Like, I personally also prefer Premium, but I'm not gonna deny that I do enjoy Standard. I've had some really cool, like, really intense and exciting games in Standard where I was super hyped, and that I haven't, you know, I've only had a few games in Premium like that too, you know, and I enjoy both formats, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason to pick a side. You know, it's like, why is it that in other card games, I mean, I kind of know why, but it's still worth to raise the rhetoric question. It's like, in other card games, there's 2 formats too, like Expanded or like Unlimited, and then, you know, the Limited or Rotation format. People seem to enjoy both without there being a huge fight. Is it just because there's so many different mechanics in Premium that it makes it more difficult? Like, I don't feel like that should be the case, especially looking at VBT05. And so, that's the kind of thing where I really don't like the divide. I really don't like how split it is. I don't like, I'm not a fan of either Standard naysayers or Premium naysayers. Like, I don't like picking a side, but obviously if, Like, to me, when Premium was getting beat on all the time, obviously I wanted to take its side too, because it's like, you don't need to beat on it so much. Like, what has Premium done to you? Like, did you get, like, killed by Gize back when it was, like, relevant and now it's not? Like, celebrate the fact that it's not, you know? There's so many things in Premium. I'm gonna have a whole separate video talking about Premium and how I got into it, because at first, I think a lot of you know, I was more into Standard, because to me, Standard was associated with spreading the game, and so I focused on that really hard and didn't really do much Premium. And so then I rediscovered Premium properly, and I want to make a video talking about that. So that's gonna be for a separate video. But like, to me, it's like, I just don't get, why must there be such a split? Like, why must everybody be so mad? Like, I really just don't get what's the end game, like the end goal of this, you know? It's like, do you really wake up every day in your life just going like, okay, today I'm gonna log on to Vanguardians and I'm gonna post about how much I hate Premium because XYZ, or how much I hate Standard because XYZ. It's like, do you really feel value in your life doing that? Like, I don't know if this might make some people mad, you know, me saying this, but I really feel like it's pointless. Instead of always just being at each other's throats, why don't you just embrace the game? Doesn't matter if you enjoy Standard or Premium, just embrace the game that you play. You can have a coherent discussion saying what you like and dislike about each format, but you don't have to be saying like, you know, this format needs to die, or this format is terrible and unplayable, etc. Each of them has their merits. You know, they have their downsides and their upsides, and that's just the way it works. I think the thing that really drills this into my mind, or like really cements it in the ground, is that the fact that, like, would you really want, let's say a new player gets into the game, whether it's through Standard or, you know, like thinking that Luard looks really cool and wanting to get into Premium immediately, someone gets into the game and then they ask their friend, oh, what are some big Facebook groups that I can check out, or some big community spots? And then they join it. First thing they see is huge fights about the format. If I'm getting into a new game and that's the first thing I see, I'm noping the hell out of there, because it's like, do I want to be part of a toxic community? Hell no. Like, this community used to be really, really nice and really helpful. It still is. Like, parts of it still are, the majority of it still is. It's actually mostly the vocal minority that makes it seem like such a big deal, and then a bunch of people that don't really think too much about it, that just, you know, agree with it. But I think it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's, don't you want to make this community a nice place for people to enter? That's kind of my thing. It's like, we're trying to spread the game. Why are you trying to push that away? Like, why are you trying to deter from that, you know? And so that was an effect from the split. That was definitely, I mean, an effect from the reboot, and that caused the split. And to me, the split is by far the worst thing, and I wish it never happened. Like, not that I'm saying like the reboot's a bad thing, but it's just, I wish they addressed this somehow, like some way to calm it. I don't, it's obviously too late now. It's just gonna either calm on its own, or it's gonna go on forever. But it's like, I feel like on day one when they announced the reboot, something else should have been said to maybe quell this from the get-go. I don't know. I really don't know. That's something for a different video. But yeah, that's by far the biggest negative, in my opinion. And then the other thing is that, sure, at the start of the game, things were pretty simple, effects were pretty simple, and then people often, like, I'm trying not to like vouch for Premium here, but how do I word this? Basically, Standard's getting more complex, which is a good thing. The only bad thing is that getting people into the game, you know, explaining to them the simple rules of Standard, and then showing them Ganslot and being like, yeah, this thing, like this Vanguard circle that only exists once on your playmat actually becomes 2. Or like with plant tokens, it's like, yeah, actually, you have these things that don't exist in your deck that you need to actually find from packs, or like buy from an online store, or ask your friends to give you. It's like, a lot of these external things, to me, it just, so many decks right now use external factors. And so, it's not a bad thing. It's interesting and it makes it exciting, but it's just hard to, like, for a new person to handle that. When G was on, like, throughout all of G, sure, it got complex, and combos like Time Leap and Night Rose were pretty complex, but they were like within the deck. You didn't have to access some other zone, Bind Zone, but like you didn't have to access additional cards or break the rules to actually like do these things. They were all like still like intrinsic parts of the game. That's kind of what I mean. Like it's getting a bit more difficult, which is nice. I like that. I like that it's getting more difficult, and like Standard is becoming more skill based, but I feel like it could be done in a more simple way. I don't know. It's exciting. I am obviously excited. I like Ganslot's design, and like I like the new Azel and all these things, but that's just something I need to, you know, address as well. Like, it is getting more difficult with a double-edged sword. It's like, it's more enjoyable for people that are in it, but it might scare some of the new players. And it's like, weren't you trying to attract new players from the start? That's kind of the thought I'm trying to push here. Next up, it got expensive. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Card games are always expensive. It's just that what I'm saying is that, like, at the start of the game, people were, everybody was happy that the decks were so cheap. The reason why they were cheap is because everything that you needed just released and everything was in circulation. Now Wave 2 or 3 comes around of, clan supports, and then draw PGs are hard to get. Oops, they went from 50 cents to $6. Like, obviously it's going to happen because the supply is getting lower, the demand is still high, so that's just how Vanguard has been this whole time, and I feel like a lot of people convince themselves that Standard would always be cheap, and that's just how card games are. They're always going to end up being expensive at some point, as long as they keep going, unless there's rotation. And even with rotation, there'll be cards that are expensive. I mean, look at Pokemon TCG for an example. Like, that's just the way to attest for it. So I think, like, there's no real point to complain about, like, Bermudas being $300, etc. Because, like, Bermudas are an exception. This is full VRs, it's full bling and, like, whatever. But it's like, it's not that surprising that PGs went up. It's not that it's surprising that old cards went up, even from a year ago. That's just how it is. That's just how card games are. It's not really a negative. This is like in the middle kind of thing. It's like, I just want to kind of clear it up. It's like, there's no real reason to be surprised about it. Like, that's just how things are. Another thing I want to say is the Bermuda impact. So, when ZR, Xerath Dragons, came out in G, people were freaking out because they seemed really crazy, then the pull rates were terrible, a lot of people were freaking out for a good reason. And so, some people quit, some people were like, well, I don't want any of this mess anymore, like, it's clearly becoming too chaotic. The last wave of, like, G, like, Z, seemed too chaotic for some people, and so they dropped. And so that was fine. I mean, it's not fine, sorry, that's not fine. But, some people just couldn't handle it, and it's fine, so people can't afford, a card game like that. So it makes sense. So then Reboot happens, and then people say, well, at least this is a bit more toned down, which is nice, yet it was more toned down. Like, OTT at its prime was definitely more toned down than, like, like, Rinne, like, Dominate at its prime or something, or, like, Zodiac Time Beasts. So, having said that, once Bermuda rolled around in Standard, we kind of had the same effect of, like, this deck is so much better than everything else. Like, it just drops this huge board on turn 3. And I'm not saying Bermuda's not beatable. I literally clapped Bermuda twice, in my locals this last weekend, going, undefeated basically. And so with Narukami, of all things, because it's actually a good matchup, because I can bind their Sonatas and Finas and Karos, and then, they don't have much stuff left and they can't recycle with Stetsa. But the thing is that, like, with Bermuda, not everyone has that mindset of like, oh wait, they're actually beatable. Some people just see Bermuda, and then they see this like, oh my god, they can make 71k on turn 3 on 3 different columns, like this is crazy. And they freak out, and then they're like, well, I don't want to play this game anymore. And then, they might either, like, optimally, they go try out Premium, which a lot of people did. And so Premium did, like, go through a boom in Japan because of that, because people were like, well, Standard's just kind of like Bermuda or nothing, or now like Bermuda or Kagero. Obviously, it's now recovered from that state to an extent. Bermuda's still the best deck, but, like, there's more decks that are, like, getting to its standards. But the thing is that, like, some people tried out Premium, but some people went to different card games because they just couldn't handle it, and they didn't want to shell out $300 just to be competitive in this game, because it was still Springfest season, and in Japan there was a bunch of events like the BSF, or WGP, like, it was just, like, it called for it. That's just how it was. And so now it's getting better, obviously, and, like, a lot of these new clans that are getting support are, matching up to Bermuda standards, and there's a chance that Bermuda will get restricted still, so, it's getting better. But the initial impact of Bermuda, not a good thing. I feel like Bushiroad made a bit of an oopsie on that one, so I feel like it could have been done a bit better. Finally, this again, like a lot of these negatives, like I said, they're not really big negatives. A lot of them are like these gray area middle status things. And so, to me, this is a very personal thing. This is something that I already addressed in the positives, but the growing casual player base isn't that good for competitive play. Like, not that it isn't good, but it's just that a lot of the casual players that just stay at home and play with their friends, they don't really come to locals. And if you want to grow a game in a country or in a city, locals is the way to go. Because if people come into the shop and they see people at locals playing Vanguard, they think, oh damn, this game's being played in this area, I might want to pick it up. Or I might actually go through with it in the end. Maybe they were hesitating and now they're like, okay, that convinced them. And so the fact that a lot of the people that pick up the game casually don't even try to play the game at locals is pretty unfortunate. And I feel like diminishing local communities is definitely not a good thing, because local communities are what keep the game going, and it's really important for the game. It's always been a really important part of the game. And so to me, it's kind of sad, I guess, that a lot of these people that play the game with just their friends don't bother trying it out in locals. And so, I mean, I guess this is just kind of me saying, like, give the game a try at your locals. Try to find your locals, basically. If you see they have tournaments, just come by. Like, just join, just swing by. It doesn't hurt to try. Like, it's not going to kill you to use, like, 2-3 hours of your afternoon, maybe 4, you know. So, don't worry about that and just give it a shot. That's kind of like me, like, you know, rallying people to try for locals. But, so like I said, like, these negative points aren't all that negative. They're more gray areas. I think the only real negative thing is the divide. Like, to me, that's by far the worst thing, and it's the only real, like, super bad thing. And so I wanted to address that. So that's my retrospective on the reboot. As you can see, it's very mixed. It's like there's big positives, there's one big negative, and then there's a lot of stuff like in between that just kind of like fills the timeline, I guess. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think. I want to know what your thoughts are on the reboot, really. Like, what do you feel has been kind of like the impact to you as a player or to your community, so we can have a little bit of a discussion in the comments. So thank you so much for watching. Check out all the stuff in the description as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.